boy, we've pushed our way to the 1 p.m. turn, and the Union was holding back here because of Grant gave orders over here to Meckler, and he can't roll for that until 2, but the Union's holding back here because they needed to kind of recover. The units that have the primary orders were all disordered, and so they're kind of recuperating back there. I view that as acceptable, and it certainly is acceptable since I'm exchanging small arms fire at that range. So this has devolved mainly into an artillery duel with some long-range small arms fire, although the Union had to recover ammo there, so they only got half the fire anyway, and they have half the size, so they got significantly less effect. They caused a casualty, but they've taken more than that. The only bad thing was this stack ended up bloodlusted, which could end up charging forward. Now, for the Confederates, the only bad thing for the Confederates there, I don't know how worthwhile one unsupported unit charging forward is. I know these units have taken a lot of hits, though. L and C. L is Lee and C is Cumming. Cumming's racked, and Lee has taken some losses. I probably thought it looks like less than I thought it was, but the Union probably does think that it's more. Not only has Loring kind of positioned himself in his defensive, but Bowen got an initiative roll, and he's moving forward to charge up Champion Hill and drive the Union off. That's bad news for the Union there in a lot of ways, because if this army gets pushed back, or if this formation, whatever the hell it is, it's not a corps, because it's pieces of two different corps kind of glued together somehow. If that gets slammed back and defeated, well, then it's probably not going to be able to pursue a good hit on Champion Hill again, and that kind of maybe frees up Stevenson's division to protect the road a little bit more up here against this fragment of a corps, which isn't going to be moving yet. So that's an intriguing proposition, especially since I can't do anything with these. Knowing that the Union's hands are tied is very helpful to the Confederates, because they can just march away safely. They know they're not going to have these guys chasing on their heels right away. That's a little unrealistic, but hey, Pemberton's tactical genius is showing through. Indeed, we had an attack stoppage pushing... the Union fell back along Jackson Road, and now I'm left with kind of these sporadic orders that I've granted to these other two units that really make a lot less sense right now. It made sense when I was making that forward attack. I also have Bowen's units on the march, and what they do may change my attitude, because they're probably going to make an attack that the Confederates maybe don't want made anymore, because the prime goal was to drive the Union back. Now, they had some intentions on that attack that went to taking Champion House and getting the victory points for that space as well. But that was more of a, as the Union breaks in their attack, pursue them and hit them a little harder. Maybe they're sitting around with no orders. And that may end up being the case. Grant has to figure out something to do when under the pressure of Bowen's attack. He doesn't know what's happening. He doesn't know quite what's going on at this point. Halfway through the 1:30 turn, these forces still don't have their orders. But new Union reinforcements coming into play for the 17th Corps, and we're forming a defensive position here. I shifted the headquarters up a little, the Army headquarters, simply, and yes, basically I don't roll for acceptance for that. If the leader's with the headquarters, he can move it, is kind of how I take it, and it doesn't count against he's able to use that as his recharge turn, etc. Just because there's, I don't know. It works better for me. In the original rules, you can move it whenever the hell you like, up to through version 2. The version 3 rules require you write orders for it. That's just too much of a pain in the ass bookkeeping wise for little effect, so I kind of do a compromise. You can write orders for it, but otherwise it will just automatically accept an in-person verbal. And actually, the restriction on order writing means you can only write orders from your headquarters. Things got twisted there, too, in ways that I don't know. Anyway, the question is now what the Confederate attack is going to do. I've moved Pemberton into place to give Stevenson some orders, if I wish. I feel like Bowen alone isn't enough now that these surprise reinforcements... You know, it's funny. There's no fog of war on the map, but for me, I'm never quite sure where reinforcements are coming in or whatever. And I'm often quite surprised by their joining the battle. Which, you know, if you were familiar with the battle and had played it a few times, you wouldn't really have that issue. But I find it kind of enjoyable to be, whoa, they had more. Yes, Bowen's little command, these two units in the woods here, are popping their noses out and getting shot. They didn't take any losses. They didn't cause any long-range fire, even with the artillery thrown in. But they look woefully inadequate for this task. And at this point, I'm kind of wishing that this didn't all get put into commission. I'm beginning to think that I'm going to roll initiative next turn for Bowen to try to get back out of this, that this attack was just foolishness. Despite the anti-initiative, Bowen got himself another initiative, and this time he's falling back to Champion Hill to defend, which is where I want him. He's facing the majority of the Union forces now. I don't know. All I know is these guys are moving, but I can detach some of Stevens's forces up to the roadblock to help against that. And I've actually shifted the line a little bit with that intention, which cost me a straggle recovery attempt, which is probably a very bad thing. But I felt like I have to reorganize my line. Anyway, so far, the Union does not have orders here. And Grant is in position to give orders. He's going to be giving some kind of attack order. Stevenson didn't accept his orders. He tried for initiative and didn't get it. This turn was Pemberton's recharge turn. So next turn, if Stevenson still doesn't take up those orders, I can go up to him and say, cancel those orders. But actually, I can write him orders this turn that do that. So by next turn they will be canceled, and I'll take care of that simply by canceling them. Because if Pemberton writes the orders this turn, they're going to get to Stevenson by next turn, and then he orders. So when you get orders and you have a pending stack of orders, the new orders, unless maybe you do something special to change that, like after you complete those orders, you know, basically being a rewrite the old orders as an addendum to the new orders. Anyway, which you could do physically if you wanted to write more. All the pending orders are destroyed. So if you have orders that say, return to the orders that you are currently under, you can basically delete pending orders that way and just act as if they haven't happened. But you have to have the written orders or whatever get there in time. In this case, they did. Or they would. They will. Well, Confederate failure to allocate more resources to defend the roadblock, which, given the rules in this game, probably should have been done, although I don't think it historically was at this point. The Union's able to kind of not attack it straightforward and come around it, as we see here, get an enfilading fire, and that detachment just disappeared, even with all the benefits for it. We also have Smith's forces beginning to move, and I'd say things look pretty bad for the rebels at this point. And we see the Confederates throw up a quick defense in that direction. They actually have the right to do more than defend, to try to push it back, because that's part of Stevenson's command there. And also tighten things up here so that we're defending against the actual threat instead of spread all over hell and creation in a way that didn't really serve any purpose. Right now, for the Union, that's not good meaning. I should have a circle there. For the Union, we're awaiting orders for the 17th Corps to start moving back against Champion Hill. And when that happens, that's just going to be too much pressure, I think, for the Confederates to hold the position there. Likewise, over here, I don't think Loring can hold out against that. That looks bigger than him. Confederates are definitely outnumbered in this little fight here. Union attacks begin in earnest on all fronts with the 17th Corps moving into the action, coming up onto Hill. 13th Corps fraction or portions coming gotta look for the Rosette again from the east side of the hill and putting heavy pressure. They've brushed right through that road block with no problem because there wasn't any support for it. And then also whatever the hell you want to call this, Smith, who got killed actually over here, and Blair from the 15th Corps are launching an attack here. This is a very painful position to assault. They took some heavy casualties there. That's the 10th of the 13th. You can see they took 4 hits just coming in there. I gotta remember to look through the camera rather than just guess that I'm hitting the right place. I guess now we move on to the Confederate side of this turn. And you know, this is a short game. We're running out of time. It started all the way here. We're almost halfway through already. But there's enough time to fight a battle. And not a whole lot of forces. So not really enough time to fight several days worth of battle here. And as we slide into the 4 p.m. turn, Confederates are having real ammo problems. That's probably their worst issue here. Yes, they're outnumbered up here, but they're actually dealing pretty good damage. But 3 of their units are out of ammo now there, or low ammo. That means the Union could actually just stand off and fire at them without any risk until they go low on ammo as well. But they've got supply wagons in the area. The Confederates have supply wagon here, which resolved one issue, but then they gained some more here, so they're going to have to move down and handle that as well. The Union has a total lack of supply here. They have no way of getting it. But the Confederates have to run their army supply back and forth to try to maintain some semblance of firepower coming out of, with any consistency. Confederates are also almost out of artillery ammo. They're down to 7 rounds left. That's not going to last the rest of the game. And you want to use it before you lose it. You don't want to use it on long-range fire, but for the most part, I'm using it at a few hexes, 2-3 hexes, where it's pretty effective. But I may want to stop firing unless they're at point-blank range, basically. 1 hex away where I get the full gun power. Every firepower point from the guns is counted as a point on the table. The Union continue their push even harder. In fact, here they actually made a close combat attempt. They got repulsed. Actually, it was from this hex. And then they got driven back by fire. Now that fire enabled them clear to gun, and that's one of the reasons they're pushing hard everywhere, trying to get in position with this bad tree terrain, the forests, where the guns have to spend 7 movement points just to move into the hex. It's really hard to get them set up for fire, but if I can stay with a screen for them for a little bit, I can set them up for fire and then fall back to them and fire at longer range. That's particularly important because the Confederates are almost out of ammo, whereas the Union still has like 29 rounds left. Heavy casualties on both sides. Assuming these numbers are correct, we're at nearly 6,000 Union and just about 4,000 Confederate. Struggle continues, but ran into a couple of kind of icky spots in the game. First of all, I've ignored the rule on the detachment entirely. It shouldn't be allowed to recover stragglers. It is a set of stragglers off of Cummings's brigade here. And the way they're supposed to work is it's 3 strength points. Well, they count as stragglers on Cummings that you can't recover. But after the detachment's eliminated, well, then you could recover it perfectly fine. And if it takes any casualties, those casualties are removed from Cummings' brigade. So the way I did that is essentially, since I had recovered all the strength of it, I just incorporated it back. That's kind of cheating in favor of the Confederates a little bit. But I took the 1 casualty over there. What I ought to do is erase this so it doesn't confuse my numbers in the rest of the game. I've removed the counter from the game. It can't reoccur. However, the reason I got to that was there are, oh, there it is, Stevens Infantry. The unit can trace command to any brigade of Stevenson's division. Fits in with command, okay. And it can't leave the roadblock, okay, whatever. We're fine with whatever happened, I'm sure. Anyway, the other thing that kind of made me grumpy was this unit here, which has orders to go take this and sit on it. Now, brigade orders like that show up in a few games, and they always kind of annoy me because I'm not sure exactly how you're supposed to recover them for the unit. In a sense, I feel like the way the rules are written, you can just cancel them at any time, but that seems a little extreme. What I'm liable to do, though, is next turn, Pemberton will walk down there and say, yo, you're needed, you know? Get back with your division in this case. But other than that, we're seeing a lot of damage coming through in this. I'm not sure how much longer the Union can keep up its attacks. On their case, it's hard because the structures aren't where you expect them. So what's 1013? Well, 1013 is on an individual goal here, and it's now wrecked. It's a wrecked of a wrecked. It's also lost its leader. He was killed, actually, which will be another penalty against it maintaining its actions. The 15th, well, they only have support orders, so it doesn't matter that they're not in as bad a shape. They're going to have to get new orders if they want to continue on the attack. Over here, this is, I believe, the 13th Corps, but I got to be careful because Smith and whoever's up there, and I don't know who it is, are not part of it right now. I think that's Hovey. So we've got Carr and Osterhaus, and they're in okay shape. There's nothing wrecked there. But Hovey is a wrecked unit of the 17th now, which has no other wrecked units. So out of the 3, MacArthur's optional. Out of the 3 that exist there, one of them's wrecked, so there's a possibility of this failing its command control. This is what happens when you end up attaching and detaching all over the place. It makes the game harder to play. The problem with this scenario is that Grant's already done this at the beginning of the game, so you can't do yourself any favors, really. And it should be easier probably to play the longer version of this game, the early in the day attack, which would allow you to actually dispose of your troops in a rational fashion, I'd hope. But maybe not, because the 13th Corps is on the board, and there's a lot of things you want to do, so splitting it up may be the most reasonable thing that you can do anyway. Often in these games, it's just coming down to a hair's breadth as to which side cracks before the other. In this case, it looks like the Union's breaking. McClellan decided he's had enough, and he gave up his orders. And that's a big deal, because just attacking here with McPherson's forces is not likely to do well. We'll see. the Confederates are pretty badly used, but you can see he pushed back some of those units there. And once the Confederate supply wagon gets over there and recharges the ammo there, that'll be kind of helpful. The one big advantage the Union has, though, is the Confederates are out of ammo. Now, unlike something like Terrible Swift's sword, being out at Orb, I think it also applies to the RSS games. Being out of ammo, not being able to fire off your ammo track, that just halves your effectiveness, which, you know, those artillery can still do quite a bit. Now, you don't have the option to not spend ammo in order, you know, where you've got good firepower already or whatever. You got to spend it while you got it. So now the Confederates are out. They wouldn't have spent some of the shots they had, holding them for a rainy day perhaps, but just withholding fire altogether doesn't make sense. But it would make sense not to have to spend the ammo given the way it's treated later. But anyway, now you've got a slowed down rate of fire or whatever, but there's still ammunition floating around somehow magically. Over here we also saw Smith's replacement, whoever the hell that is, and we don't know the name. I mean, when I used to really like these and play games like this, because of Terrible Swift Sword maybe, I would promote a specific person. I'd say, oh, it's Burbridge who's in charge, or Landrum got the command, or whatever, you know, and track it. But then once everybody's wiped out in the command, I start saying, well, you know, that's about as cool as Colonel T. Yeah, so the 15th Corps attachment here, which is largely out of ammo anyway, can't continue the attack on its own since all it has is support orders, which pretty much means it's down to this one attack here. There's enough time to get another attack started maybe, to get McClellan moving, but we're not going to see the dramatic movement cutting through Ratliff Road, catching the Confederates in a pincer or whatever. Anyway, now I got to deal with this stupid RS unit, which I'm going to try to get up there. I'm afraid this battle is essentially over. The Union, McPherson stopped his attack as well now, pulling back. He doesn't have to pull back very far, just out of line of sight, basically. In fact, in some places I'm a little deeper in than I need to be. Grant is doing, there's a once-a-day option in the 3.0 rules. I'm not using, there's living rules beyond that. I'll have to look and see someday maybe to upgrade, but I'm sure it's a pretty minor stuff. Anyway, the option is something that used to be continuous, which was the Army commander always got together with all the Corps commanders and just sat in one space and would issue orders whenever the hell he wanted. In this case, though, under 3.0 rules, you're allowed to do that once either a day or per game. I don't remember which. So Grant's going to throw a couple of orders into play for these two units. He doesn't see much point to ordering this into an attack. In fact, if Loring was a decent commander, or Pemberton or somebody, there'd be a chance that I'd try to launch an attack there, but I don't even want to make an attempt at giving those orders. It's late in the day after all, and there isn't much to gain here. There's a half point here. This, I don't know if this is not under Union control, and it only gives points to the Union. And so really most of the board is decided here. It looks like the Confederates are keeping Champion Hill, which is really what it comes down to. The rest of the spaces, I don't see anything that they're going to get that could help. They're not going to get, say, this ford here. Even if they pushed on, they're not going to get there in time. With no time for the Confederates to really recuperate, the 17th jumps back into the fray after that meeting. McPherson's at a D1, so he may well come in too. They just have simple orders, same orders. I believe that's actually required in 3.0. I feel like the orders should all have the same general goal in a meeting, but I don't think they can be the same orders because you want to be able to make statements like advance down Jackson's Road, advance down this. But it shouldn't be too divergent. So I'd use the guidance of that all use the same order without the specifics. But in this case, my specifics are simple enough. Just take Champion Hill. That's all I want done. I want it done, and I want it done before the end of the game. So you don't have a lot of time. Just do it. We dissolved, what is it here? Cockrell's brigade. It's just gone. And Bowen's command, though, isn't it? Well, it's getting weakened, this Green Brigade, but he's not wrecked yet. So, he doesn't have to make a failure roll. I do have to worry, though, about shifting my troops to face the 17th a little stronger. And getting this, who is that? Reynolds. McClernand. Now that I can actually see his name, somebody wrote it out for me. Also came into play here. Let's move him up a little. And this is kind of amazing. You never see things this tightly packed in CWB usually. Just this total assault on one location from so many directions. I needed to catch it at this moment because it ain't going to last. Units are going to get flung back. They're not in good enough morale state to maintain that kind of cohesion. Confederates get first fire, and they're going to do their best to drive some of those Union units back. McPherson succeeded in keeping his attack going. He doesn't have too unlikely a chance of it, actually. He's a 2 leader, so he only needs to roll a 6 or better. It's just, he failed before. Actually, that positioning stayed pretty much as it is through the Union side of the turn. For the Confederates, they have a hard choice because they're getting enfilade fired here, or they have a disordered unit here. They don't really have the ability to hold this. They can't move through here, so they've got to keep these 2 pieces in play. I can't turn this one, or I'll give another enfilade in a different direction, so there's no real advantage to that. But I've got cannons there, and I've got no way out, and I'm kind of stuck there getting eliminated, as it were. Not a lot I can do there. I was hoping to be able to shift the RS over to cover the weaker flank. It's not really able to do it the way things are. I'll try to piece what I can out of there. Say the disordered artillery. That's not going to be easy to get into play anyway. That's here. Confederate fire under these conditions is getting weaker and weaker. Just not in a position, the units are disorganized when they're firing in many cases. They're becoming very small. That's a disappeared unit, but many of them are becoming small. The Union units are also suffering losses, no question there. But I have a little bit more mobility and a little bit more numbers there so that I can stack. Like here I've got 2 B-sized units adding up to an A, so I'm getting full firepower there. One thing I definitely like out of the version 3 rules, they seem to have eliminated fire splitting. It used to be you could split fire, I think, however you liked, and you could do some really wacky things by doing that. Like, I'll use 1 point here to get me up on the table here, and this, that, and the other. And you could essentially split, if you had 2 4-point units, you could split a fire point off of one of them so that one fires at 5 and one fires at 4. You're adding to your risk of low ammo, though. And usually that's not worth it, but sometimes it's really vital. And it's nice to see, the hell with that. Just fire all your shot at one thing. It doesn't really make that big a difference. And it was a real headache to try to do. I was pretty good at it, but I know people back from my TSS days at least, who couldn't handle trying to do the fire splitting and getting their numbers exactly where they want them, not even really being sure where they want them. So it's something that, like, familiarity with the system makes, and your own tastes makes it easier to make those choices. And they really, I don't know, they're not something that adds to the game as far as I'm concerned. They don't really add to the realism, and they don't really add to the experience as a whole or the enjoyment. And they certainly don't add to this the tactical positioning. They become this silly optimization having to do with fire points versus chances of losing ammo. And that just, it's good to see that gone. Champion Hill still had fire splitting allowed in the original rules. It's only in version 3 that they seem to have eliminated it. And I think they got rid of it entirely, because I remember somewhere where they said, look, remove all references to fire splitting in this paragraph. It just doesn't exist anymore. Anyway. Still tough pressure. The Union's got to make core attack stoppage checks again, and there's a chance they might not take it because of that, because their units are wrecked. You can see, boom, and the 17th is not in great shape either. Oh, geez. That's the end of the battle. 6:30, Union, both corps fail their command checks, and there's just not time to get back into it. I'll come back with a count up and a little bit of a wrap and review of the whole thing. Alright, so at the end of the day, quick count up of wrecked brigades. Only permanent wrecked count. Well, each side actually only had one of those. That's a point there for each. The losses, the Union managed to inflict some pretty serious losses in that final round comparatively. And you can see the totals came out to 78 for the Union to 71 for the Confederates. That spells trouble for the Confederates because, as in all games, they take their losses more dearly. And I think it's 13 points to the Confederates and 16 for the Union for the losses. The only terrain in the battle that seems to be worth anything that anyone has. Oh no, the Union got a point here. What is that? 26-20. Yeah, that's where the Union point. I didn't get that right. Okay. So the only thing that I could see that was worth anything is actually the hill. And I gave that to the Confederates, but actually they probably shouldn't even have that because they weren't the last people here. It's still essentially contested. Now, there is the question of whether you would see another day of battle under these circumstances. I'm not going to play it out. But what you have is units that aren't really completely wrecked that an overnight could recover. And point-wise, when we add it all up, the Union ends up at 18 points, 16 plus 1 plus 1. The Confederate terrain I took away, so 14, which is a 4-point spread, which is just enough to get you to a draw. Grant obviously ain't going to give up. And I'm almost tempted to go to another day, look at the extra units, and see what might get pulled into play on another day. Because this is... I'm looking to see if there's anything, but there's almost nothing. Nothing available here. Johnston's not around. I mean, his army is not going to be able to come into play here. He's nearby, but he doesn't have any kind of organization he could bring into play. So, I'll tell you what, I'm going to think about it real hard because I got a couple of days here after Christmas. And I'd have to start something new, and I kind of don't want to do Thunder right away. If I want to do more CWB, I want to keep going with this. So I may continue through the night. I'm going to look up a little bit about the battle, get a little more perspective. I started really thinking about it, but the Confederates started stacking Sherman's Corps up, which is certainly on its way to the battlefield. It just had trouble getting into play late. The problem is the Confederates are out of ammo. The other problem is I wrote over here on the Confederate command sheet, but I was going to start a new command sheet. But the Confederates are out of artillery ammo. They just can't hold the position. Come tomorrow, this battle becomes unimportant because they didn't have the rounds of ammo. Now, in the big gathering of hosts ones, they have more ammo, 30 more points. But that's not really available. What's really available is probably 10 more points of artillery ammo, the 50 points on the Pemberton on the attack. That's probably all they can scrounge remaining from the defense of Vicksburg without really weakening their position. So I'd say that this is indeed over. The Confederates are not going to stick around and fight the rest of the battle. And there's no way this is going to affect the outcome of Vicksburg. Whether there's a Union victory or a Confederate victory doesn't really matter here. A massive Confederate victory that shattered the Union Army would matter. But the Confederates can't field their force effectively enough in the face of not having ammo. And the Union will be getting more ammo in. They'll be getting 25 more points, putting them up with enough to fight another day, probably. The early start doesn't give more ammo either. Yeah. So I'm going to call this here because Mr. Logic tells me that this battle would not continue another day under these circumstances. It's kind of a shame because this game so far feels a little disappointing. I was so thrilled with No Better Place to Die. I forgot that was once upon a time my second favorite of the series. It may still be. It's hard to tell. I haven't... Shiloh has such an ugly map. I really did like the 7 days, though, and the way that spread out. But I have been, like I said before, selling this one in comments as, well, it's a fairly small one that does work, as a starter. Given the corps, the divisional orders for the Confederates, given the confusion having to do with the corps structure of the Union forces, with them, the three columns being completely scattered. Certainly, if you're going to play the historical scenario, I'm not sure this is such a great fit for a first game for it. So, out of stuff that's in stock, I guess I'm going to go with Three Battles of Manassas as the best choice here. This one is a confusing little battle. Just, so many different little fronts in it. And I was kind of getting into the swing of it at the end. But it's the historical scenario is so short, I almost think I should have started with the early start scenario, allow me some chance to develop a different battle with the same forces. I feel like these games where the troops are poised, right, ready to hit, always kind of leave me a little dry. That's why in No Better Place to Die, no, I'm sorry. Was it that? Yeah, No Better Place to Die. I play out, this 4-day setup rather than just starting from the historical start date. Strangely, there's no campaign that starts from the historical position, which might be an interesting thing to do. There's no reason you can't do it. You just start it at that point and play it through the next couple days. The problem, of course, being that's a battle where the first day of battle is the battle, and then you have the troops hanging around in the area unwilling to budge and some skirmishing, but the armies really are too wrecked. And in this case, there just wasn't the ammo for the Confederates to stick around. I just can't see them. It would be really ugly. The reason the Confederates were able to hold their own in the battle is that they had all that artillery fire coming in. With that cut in half, I'm not sure what troops I could even bring in. It's obvious Sherman's definitely coming in. Whether MacArthur's division comes in, I'm not sure. That would be a later call. I was kind of looking through the gathering of hosts to see when that would be due. Now that's supposed to come in. Is this more than one day? No, that's supposed to come in midday. So presumably they're kicking around closer to the battlefield than Sherman is and would be available for a call. For the Confederate, here I am throwing nearly everything the Union has for the gathering of hosts scenario, and the Confederates are not going to get what they need, which would be, I think the other army, the relief army, is present here. I'm looking to see if it is. Yeah, that's present to come in. So the numbers would be further skewed against the Confederates. I'm sure there are some forces that I could gather together here from the minor variants. We got Wall. And Smith's division here, which was left out. But that just does not make up for what we're talking about here with a whole corps coming in. Now, one unit, well, actually two divisions of the corps because Blair's already on the field. I don't know. It's pretty big. And then if I throw in MacArthur, who probably would be coming in for a second day of battle, things are beginning to get a lot uglier in the overall situation. So, mixed feelings on this one. I enjoyed it, but it does create more headaches than I like, and I feel like the historical scenario is a little too much. All right, here you are. You ain't got many choices. You had more choices with the Confederates. You saw what I did with them, moving Bowen up here and falling back and giving up this hex. Actually, the Union gets a half point for the hex that they took there. Whoop, whoop. Presented a better, stronger defensive position. The Union's not going to be able to cut through here very easily. They're not going to cut through here. They've got fairly simple tasks to take on, and if you start trying to do something fancy on that initial setup, you're going to just make a mess out of your life. Almost took Champion Hill. All right, anyway, trying to figure out what's next. I'm leaning towards Desert Fox, but there's also the fact that, I don't have to learn anything, or more importantly, explain any rules if I just set up Thunder right now. But I like to break the games up. All right, let's send this one up.